Hey, everybody, welcome to SecDays Virtual 2025 from GitGuardian. We're here with an awesome panel to discuss the expanding identity attack surface beyond human users. As we all know, non-human identities are everywhere. They're outnumbering humans. Some people say up to 100 to 1, at least 50 to 1 across the industry. And we're here to have a conversation about that. So I'm here to host and lead this conversation, but I'm definitely not the subject matter expert in the room. That is the team we have lined up here. So I'll ask you all to introduce yourself one at a time.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here with you and all the respected gentlemen here. My name is Oded. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Achilles. Been in the cybersecurity industry for more than 20 years. Started my way the Israel Defense Forces with cybersecurity. Identity and access management has been my specialty there. And ever since, later on is with CA Technologies. Yeah, 6 years ago, together with my partners, we started Achilles within the realm of machine identity and secrets management.
My name's David Goldschlag. I'm co-founder and CEO at Ambit. Ambit, we've been around about 3.5 years. We do workload IAM. So if you think about Okta, which is IAM between users and services, Ambit is IAM between pieces of software.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Eric, CEO and co-founder of GitGuardian. We protect enterprise against leaked secrets and mismanaged identities.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lalit Choda. I'm the founder and CEO of the Non-Human Identity Management Group. Our mission is to educate, evangelize around non-human identities. And I've now been given the nickname Mr. NHI in the industry.
Yep, I'm CJ May. I'm the industry color commentary for the day. So I work at Vermeer Corporation, which is a manufacturing company. So we deal with all sorts of NHIs from, your typical business-to-business SaaS, as well as machinery. I'm honored to be invited to the panel today. Happy to be here.
So let's just dive right into this topic. And I think one of the major issues in the room is visibility. I've talked to a lot of people in this industry. Visibility into the issue is really the bottleneck, I think, for a lot of teams. So I'm curious, Lalit, maybe we can start with you on your thoughts on that. How should we tackle this? How can we go around tackling this fragmentation, and why should we do this now?
Yeah, look, I think great question. I think over the last sort of 5+ years, we've seen clearly a lot of hyper fragmentation in the industry, right, with sort of multi-cloud, sort of SaaS, containerization, microservices, and we've seen a huge issue around secret sprawl. Secrets, passwords are all easily discoverable now across the industry. I guess your report, highlighting 24 million secrets found in public GitHub repos last year, just shows the sort of kind of the mess we've now got in the industry, kind of as kind of it's grown so fast, the industry, but sort of it hasn't taken a sort of a security first posture. And we're now seeing lots of breaches in the industry around NHIs getting exposed, discovered, and compromised. So look, I think each organization really needs to sort of understand sort of what exposure they're sitting on. And clearly the starting point needs to be, understand your inventory, understand the size of the problem, and then sort of take things from there. But clearly, given the complex environments that we have, getting your inventories, understanding the size of the problem is not a small task. I guess I'll just pause there and maybe have others kind of add some thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe to add a few words, I think right now, after the microservice, the DevOps revolution, where a lot of companies added more services, implemented more SaaS, we have a new phase with like AI agents. So you have pretty much like every company in the world trying to POC AI agents and make real use case out of them. So to actually make them work, you need to give them access to a lot of data. That's how these LLM are powerful. You need like tooling context so they can actually help you deliver like a stronger return on investment. And unfortunately, you give access to this LLM to real credential, could be your internal CRM, could be your knowledge base, could be your customer data. And actually right now it's a bit crazy how the secret sprawl is even increased by AI agents, and it's even more complex and more difficult than before.
Well, when you look at it, also thinking of, if I may just chime in and add my perspective on that. when you look at what we've had here for the last 20 years and 30 years within identity and access management, focusing so much on the human aspect, so many different solutions that are here in order to solve for the human, the privileged human, the authentication, authorization of different services within different applications specifically provided for humans. For years, security teams have struggled to communicate with engineering and to try and solve for the problem of the service accounts, the way that we all used to describe that 10 years ago. There was a service account for this, and there's an application user for a certain use for that. And in terms of number, I think all of us have seen it in previous years. The number was something that always provided some kind of illusion that we can contain it. We all have all of those humans, and I remember those hundreds of thousands of those humans to be managed, employees, and then you have this particular organizational unit within Active Directory, as an example, that contains service accounts. And we all felt that this is a phenomenon that we can contain. With time, as the use of application, the break of the monolith, containerization, as Eric have mentioned, the presentation of newer technologies, as Lalit have mentioned, more and more of those identities have been added so that the ones who manage the infrastructure, and not necessarily, by the way, the security teams, right? It basically became as a phenomenon that is becoming more and more severe within the DevOps environment, the SRE, the one that are in charge for platform. And this is something that now all teams need to cooperate, and it becomes more and more complicated. The number of those identities, as you mentioned, within those ratio is becoming a phenomena that is much harder to contain. And that's the newer part here. Okay, so the number is one, the scale is one, the volume is becoming even increased, and that's even before we add AI agents into the picture. And that's the most frightening part, because AI agent, if until today as industry, we were not good enough to actually deal with machine identities and workload identities. Imagine what's now going to happen with AI agents and the fact that we're basically about to scale exponentially the number of those software components. And that leaves us also with an opportunity, but I'll leave that for the later discussion. But I believe it's a great opportunity of the era that we are here today.
Yeah, just to kind of jump off of the commentary on, the addition of AI agents, I think part of the challenge with the sprawl of secrets is thinking about secrets can really be anywhere that developers do their work. So, code, chat, emails, SaaS apps, there's the obvious ones like ticketing and documentation systems, but also if we think back to, what was it, like a year ago, that Postman was kind of blowing up and everyone was thinking, oh yeah, we have a lot of secrets there. And that's, potentially exposing that stuff. I think that AI agents are just kind of just another place where secrets live, that people are starting to realize, okay, we need to start solutioning to figure out how we can protect these and prevent them from being exposed.
So let's look into the future just a little bit. You mentioned solutions here, Oded, earlier. So eventually we're going to move to just-in-time ephemeral secrets, hopefully for everything, at scale. Why can't we just do that right now? What are the operational hurdles you're seeing out there in the industry that, why we haven't just done it that way yet?
Yeah. So firstly, this is related to the visibility question, right? I think everybody knows that there's a large problem here. Okay. I don't think that it's primarily a visibility problem. Primarily, it's a numbers problem. Okay. Right. There's so much stuff that exists, right, that needs to be improved, that if you get a list of everything, okay, you're kind of scared. It's too big a job. Okay, right. And so I think really the question is how do you choose where to start? How do you do it in a scalable way? Okay, decentralized, give teams the ability to do it. Okay, and then move and then use visibility to make sure you're getting to a better place, right, in a right cadence over time. Okay, now a lot of things. It's really amazing to me, right? The workload to workload access is stuck where human access was, right, 15 years ago, right? Service accounts, usernames, passwords, admins copying those usernames and passwords, if they're good about it, putting it in a vault, okay, right? But people are learning these long-lived credentials, and the question is how do we move people from long-lived credentials to short-lived credentials? We have techniques for doing that, okay? Lots of apps support short-lived credentials. Part of this is engineers and developers just want to build function, okay, right? And how do they not waste time on the sort of plumbing, right, that'll get to a better place, okay? And how do you make it easy for the infrastructure, okay, to support short-lived policy-based auth, right, just like we do for people, okay, while letting your engineers and developers, do the business level function that they have, okay? And so you kind of got to respect the process and then make it easy to have patterns where people can take new code and old code and migrate them to new ways. One last comment, long-lived credentials are going to be there forever. There's lots of legacy apps that just don't do it in a better way, okay? And then one of the questions is how do you keep those credentials away from people, okay, right? And I'm sure Achilles has something to say about that, right? But the idea here, right, is the world, unlike user world, is much messier here, right? So because you have decades of software investment.
Yeah, would love to comment further from David's comments, and I agree with most of those things. Just to get it more interesting, there are some things that I do not agree, which is great. This is why we're here, David. I think that you would agree, but definitely everything starts like the question of why can't we just in time, right? Why can't we just start doing it? And more than just in time, it's also about zero standing privileges, right? And we all know that, but just for the ones of our audience that do not know this particular terminology, the zero standing privileges mean that never, right? Never in under any circumstances, try not to have standing identities that are vulnerable basically for any type of hack, brute force, etc. So the idea with just in time is just to create it on time. But the idea of zero standing privileges is also to delete them after usage. So those principles go together, generally speaking. Now, with regards back to your question, Dwayne, why can't we just start just in time and zero standing privileges and to go dynamic? I think, first of all, it's the education. We need to educate the industry. It's not that clear of a concept for people that have been used to work within monolith applications, given that resources have been allocated for years. When you are examining within the newer environments, containerization, the containerized environment, and the ephemeral environments of cloud, mostly this is more logical to them because the resources with a virtualized environment are being allocated and deleted, okay, as a result of the infrastructure itself, like a function, right, like micro functions, right? Take Lambda function, for instance, within AWS, then those Lambda functions are being allocated within memory and then released. So the concept of let's also allocate the identities themselves and then release them can actually work better. So the education problem is less of a challenge within the newer environment. So education is one. Number two, there are some code sections in the world that are harder to open because no one knows them. Imagine, COBOL code or Rex code within mainframe environments, and also not necessarily that esoteric, also .NET environments and Java code that have not been opened for years. Okay. Now remember when I talked about the fact that we are also in great opening of an opportunity, the Gen AI and the fact that we're now opening codes, and you will see more and more of that technology that opens up the source code, even for older applications within the enterprise environment, you would find the opportunity to restructure code. And when you restructure code quite easily and automatically using AI, you would be able to open up those static credentials and to change them. So we will be able to see that more and more in the next coming years. But again, the fact that organizations in some cases do not even know some of those codes, that's a great barrier to move for just in time because it requires also some architectural change. To shorten my things, the technology itself is there. David for sure would tell you, I would tell you the same, that the technology to go to just in time is definitely there, but it's more of an organizational decision as well. and a lot of architectural work with the security teams. Within the notion, and I'll end my sayings with that, I do believe that there is definitely a world in which static secrets do not exist. I believe that secretless, for that sense, is definitely there. We've also calling within our solution page within Achilles to secretless AI. That's a trademark of our own, because we do believe that we can go there using advanced authentication methods and with shortened tokens, with OAuth and OIDC, and we'll talk about that later on in our discussion. But definitely there is a world without static secrets.
Just a question I'd throw out there to sort of some of the solution providers here, and I guess Oded, you kind of touched on this a little bit. How much of this is about an architectural strategy kind of problem that organizations need to think about, of how they kind of build out their sort of zero trust kind of architecture, and how much of it is, can you just plug a solution out there in the market and solve for this problem? Is it kind of a hybrid thing that an organization needs to look at, or just keen to get thoughts from some of the experts here?
Yeah, anyone else would like to comment on that before I'll go?
I think what's interesting, because as GitGuardian, we're detecting a lot of secrets in the different places of a company. What's a perspective that's really interesting also is like on the provider side. So I share stats like that's in our last State of Secrets Sprawl, but that's really interesting is we looked at all the secrets leaked in 2022. And we checked if they were valid at the time, and now if you look at the validity now, you realize like 70% of the secrets are still valid. So definitely there are a lot of long-lived secrets, but at the same time, you have also a push from a lot of NHI provider or API vendor, and the biggest one are probably the cloud provider. If you look at AWS, GCP, Azure, you had a big push on. Especially thinking about AWS STS, so static short-lived secrets with less permission, and you have the same with GitHub, fine-grained tokens giving access to less resources, adding expiration time on the generation of tokens. So you have an effort also on the API key provider side, which is super important, because if you look 5 or 10 years ago, you didn't have that. It was not for GitHub, you had basically either read or admin tokens. You didn't have a lot of choice, and it was super easy to make the mistake. So I think it's also an effort on the provider side. And unfortunately, if you look at I'm coming back at AI and LLMs, even at OpenAI secrets, the maturity on the permission is really low. And in the coming months, OpenAI is going to become the most popular API in the world, and still the restriction of access is not there compared to if you compare OpenAI to AWS in terms of management permission, airbag, and so on.
I was just gonna kind of add to. I think part of the challenge to getting to the no static secrets in the future is solutions that enable just-in-time access are not as accessible as they need to be. We think about maybe GitHub Actions as an execution environment where you can do a workload identity attestation and provision that non-human identity without a long-lived secret. Not all execution environments are going to enable that sort of attestation. I think that that's kind of a big thing that's a missing piece of the puzzle as we want to migrate organizations to this ideal future state.
Curious though, your all thoughts on this. So we've been trying to manage human identities for a very long time, privileged access management, IGA stacks. Those seem to be all falling short as far as managing the non-human identity side of things. So are we talking about new product categories are needed for NHIs, or is this just another evolution of the stack?
Yeah, look, there's a lot talked about on this topic around why the traditional IAM PAM solutions don't meet requirements. But I think, as we've already spoke about, a lot of this is about sort of, workload management. How do you kind of have processes, run autonomously, with short-lived credentials, can authenticate, communicate with other processes. So like we're dealing with very different things. Look, I think logically target state, everything will be zero trust, human, non-human. But the problems with managing, workloads is very different to kind of managing humans. We don't have a single source of truth when it comes to things like inventory of the static secrets, the inventory that's out there, like we would have for humans. So I think there's a lot of processes, right, that overlap, but there's quite a few that are very different that you do need to focus on for managing kind of NHIs, I guess, things like secret scanning, understanding where you've got hard-coded credentials that are out in the wild, and then really, things like vaulting, securing, cycling, there's some commonality, but, many of the traditional tool sets didn't really fully cover this and deal with also, I think, the breadth and sprawl, right, that we have with kind of NHIs across the industry. So having sort of solutions that can bring everything together in a holistic view, so you can look at your NHIs as you were able to look at humans, right, is kind of some of the big apps, I think, that existed with some of the kind of existing tool sets that were out there previously.
Eric, I'd be curious in your opinions on this, as we're working with a lot of folks here at GitGuardian who are trying to move away from these long-lived static secrets.
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting on the secrets and NHI problem is the reality on it's a multi-persona problem. If you think about like a secret that has leaked in code, like to actually remediate the issue and fix the incidents, you need to do multiple steps. So the first one is like you need to consider that the secret has been compromised. So there will be actually an action that done in a secrets manager like Achilles, where you have to do basically rotate the credential and revoke it. But also on the application level with the developer, you also need to make sure that you are switching to the code to the right way to call secrets. So basically calling an environment variable, calling directly a vault, encrypting secrets. So different methods you have to actually use secrets in the proper way in an application. And on top of that, you need to have your security engineer and security team that make sure that everybody respect the process and do the orchestration. So if you really take a step back, it's a three persona problem. Like you have like the developers that need to change the code. You have the SRE or platform engineer or IT, depending on the size of the company, that needs to take care of the credential. And you have the security team that need to make sure that actually everything is done properly. And that's why it's extremely difficult to do. And right now, it's definitely hard for a classic identity player where they are more used to onboarding, offboarding, to take care of the subject. So I think that's why, in my opinion, it's a new generation of products, a new generation of vendors that take the problem from this perspective, and that's why it's really hard for the traditional players.
So we see the same thing, right? So from a technology perspective, authenticating a workload is different than authenticating a person. Okay, you can't do MFA with a 4-digit PIN code. Okay, right? Somebody already mentioned workloads are ephemeral. Okay, right? They come and go. Availability here is really critical. It's very different, right, than human outages, right, for humans logging in, right? The stakeholders are different, right? This is a production environment. It's engineers, DevOps with security and compliance, right? And the workflows are different. So we're seeing that the buyers are different. Now, even from an IAM perspective, typically IAM groups are not focused on this, right? I'd love to hear perspective from people whether IAM groups will start to do this, do the human IAM groups, right? Because for now we're seeing interest, but it's coming from DevOps with security as oversight. Okay, does that make sense? Right.
Yeah, but not necessarily true, by the way, for IAM teams within some sort of organizations, right? I definitely see within the financial sector moves faster. I do see some within the retail industry as well. Some more tech-savvy organizations do move faster in terms of IAM teams. Being an IAM person myself, in a combination with developers, I definitely come from this background, and I definitely understand why the IAM teams, for the majority part, takes them more time to be educated. Gartner is doing a very good job with that, specifically for the IAM industry. There are others as well, like Cole and Fourrier, that are pushing, and IDC pushing very towards the IAM position and persona to harness and to control and to basically lead. But we'll see that more and more with time. I'd like to go back to the comments with regards to the static credentials that we've mentioned, or the technology that you asked about, right? You asked a category. Okay, it was not necessarily about the static rather than a category. The volume that David have mentioned is definitely something that that we see. The production criticality, or the mission critical, the way that currently managing those workloads, managing those machines, managing those secrets, we see that on a daily basis. The fact that, not to disrespect the privileged access management providers, or even the SSO providers, for that sense of, for humans, when you're dealing with machines, it's production time. If you're losing some of those transactions, and speaking as the one that we're currently running billions of transactions on a monthly basis, and every transaction counts for a certain workload that doesn't get the secret on time, or doesn't get a dynamic secret on time, or doesn't get a token that we provide, either an OIDC or OAuth. Those are the kind of the things that definitely impact production. And this is also part of the complexity. So think of it like the highest complexity within the identity world, very high complexity within the security world in general, and high complexity in terms of platform scale and volume. You get all of that all together, and this is where machine and machine identity is in terms of a complexity of it and the solution. And this is why you're going to see more and more of specialized tools and companies and platforms that specialize in that particular aspect. Back to your question, Dave. Dwayne, sorry.
So I just add on sort of 2 points there. One from David. I think definitely being a practitioner in investment banking for over 30 years, definitely seeing more and more IAM teams looking at this problem, and the ones that are generally driving it in collaboration, as Eric said, with your DevSecOps and your security CISO teams. I think to Oded's point, look, we've got so much legacy tech debt here, and to David's point, the operational impact if you get something wrong. We had one example kind of which started a huge NHI program, a big bank, where one database credential and NHI was shared amongst 8 applications with hard-coded credentials. So the risk of cycling a password to reduce the security posture could mean you could cause huge operational impact. So the challenges of understanding, where is a credential used, how many scripts, who's using it, who's sharing it, just that, just the bad practices of the last 30 years. There's a huge amount of technical debt there that needs to be unwound, as well as then moving to more the target state zero trust kind of architectures we've all talked about. So those are some of the reasons also why you need to have different solutions or approaches to tackling this huge complex problem.
So CJ, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this as someone who is practitioner. Is it just the awareness? Is it availability of tools? Like what's holding you back from implementing zero trust just in time all over the place?
It's kind of a twofold thing. I think accessibility and education of developers are kind of the two things. Making sure that developers have the tools available to them, that and also having someone that is providing those tools, because not all organizations are staffed to have a dedicated security person that is an expert on setting these things up and making them available to developers. A lot of times you have to have a developer that cares enough to do things the right way. And so I think education and just kind of having people that care are a couple of big things that we just don't see enough of.
So what we're seeing is it needs to be a company initiative. Okay, right? You need to care about it, the company, because a developer team can't do it on its own. Okay, but then they also need to figure out a place to start. Okay, right. And I think that's back to that fear of the problem. Tech debt's too big. Okay. So you know, if you don't start, you don't get anywhere. Okay. But the tool providers also need to play a role here, right? They need to make it easy, right? You need auth and zero trust in a sense to be able to be part of the platform in the way that DevOps and Dev can take advantage of it. Okay. And then the final one, right, is CJ, you mentioned, right? Not everything's ready. Okay, right. So it's the rare SaaS app that knows how to do federation. Okay, right, from the client perspective. Okay, right, and so I think that again, you got to start in the right place, right? And just because you can't solve everything doesn't mean you don't start. Lalit, I loved your example, right? 8 apps sharing a credential. Okay, right. As hard as that makes the migration, it also emphasizes how important it is to get it done. Okay, right. Because the compromise of that credential, right, puts everybody in a really awful place.
Yeah, totally agree with David. I think everybody recognizes the problem, but nobody wants to jump on actually fixing the stuff and then taking the ownership and the responsibility. It's why it needs to be a company initiative at the CISO level, and it's a hard decision because it's hard work. Like actually, when you revoke a credential, it could be as Oded mentioned, and it's linked to a production incident. If you actually revoke a credential that's used by a production workload, it could like have impact on your business, and it's a big risk. So you need to have the backing of the company leaders to run such a program and to do this.
I think it's also, important to mention for our audience that it's not impossible. All right, you can start on Sunday, and you can see or start on Monday and see definitely the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, there is a certain best practices to start with the greenfields, to start managing it within Kubernetes environments that are already containerized, that there is already a good amount of ability in terms of tech to interfere there and to inject those just-in-time credentials and the access policies. You can go to the DevOps stack, in which they are full of ways to plug it into that and to inject those credentials. By the way, to start injecting static and then behind the scene to rotate them for ephemeral resources or ephemeral processes within DevOps and CI/CD. This is something that is definitely not rocket science. Okay, it's definitely something that can be done without opening the code. It's something that security leaders and platform engineers can definitely advocate for and to start tomorrow morning, start doing. Not everything is related to a code that is completely signed and you don't want to open it. Actually, most of things, just to get things running, are actually open out there and can be changed. Within the classic IT environments, there are scripts that are open that you can basically open up those batch files, whatever language that those have been created, and they are less complex mostly. And again, configuration management tools, infrastructure as code tools can be open and to start leveraging just-in-time and rotated secrets.
I mean, just to add to Oded's point, at the prior organization, we actually implemented integration into our CI/CD pipelines. At the point that you check in code, we would look for static credentials, and if any were uncovered, we would block your check-in. So there are some things you can do immediately to kind of stop the bleeding.
Everybody's in agreement here. There technical changes need to be made. They're on the way. There's things we can approach, but it's also cultural. Like we do need to go across the aisle. It can't just be security. It can't just be IT. It can't just be IAM. It's got to be a combination. So I'm curious, do you have like suggestions on what are those things you can do tomorrow morning? Like, how do you start this process? How do you start that conversation internally to drive this?
Yeah, so on my end, as I've mentioned earlier, greenfields places, the one that have been containerized and modernized, there are definitely actions that can be taken tomorrow morning, if not even today. Again, Kubernetes would be the first place for us to recommend. There are injectors out there in the market that can inject those secrets. And obviously, it will require you to take some of those platforms that are able to create those just-in-time, as Achilles is offering. But eventually, DevOps environments would be the number 2, and CI/CD processes. They run IT environments and IT automation after the DevOps, if you still have any of those. And to get to the code is something that we would recommend of doing in parallel, in background, given that Gen AI would basically get there more and more with time, and that would enhance and help this whole trend to be more and more increased. So you'll meet that whenever that would happen.
So we find that you need a partnership, okay, between DevOps and security, okay, right? And first use cases especially, need a lot of trust, right? You're doing something new, okay? Organizations need to be able to work together collaboratively and solve ones. We're not finding tech stacks as the critical starting point, okay? It's kind of finding use cases that are meaningful enough, okay, and there's enough trust between the teams that it's a good place to start, okay? And we're finding sometimes it's examples that are sort of less critical, but in some cases it's examples that are very critical starting places, okay? And that is that depends on the culture of the organization, okay, right? And so for example, at Snowflake, right, they started by securing access to Snowflake, right? All your data is there, okay? And you'd think that that's too big a place to start, but that's okay, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So companies decide where to go, okay? What we also find is use those use cases to build patterns, okay, right? It should be a place where then if they did it for Kubernetes client, right, then you could do it for all the Kubernetes clients or many in the same organization. And then you learn and then it becomes a decentralized process. That's the way to resolve the tech debt problem, right? You know, you have lots of teams, lots of things, and then they can adopt this tech in a prescribed way.
I think one of the things that kind of goes unmentioned about what we're talking about is the need for a culture of learning. You know, we've talked about starting somewhere, getting some learnings from the things that we start with, but then also kind of developing a way for those learnings to be dispersed among other teams and other projects. You know, you want to have the tools and best practices in place, but people need to know how to use those. So, you know, at Vermeer, we have what's called like a tech leveling. And so this is kind of a regular opportunity for developers and various team members to share learnings from different projects that they've done. And that's, you know, that's an example that's worked for us in terms of just having a regular platform to be able to share that knowledge.
Yeah, totally aligned here. I think we learned that a lot at GitGuardian. If you look at the numbers, like developers outnumber security engineer 100 to 1. So if actually you don't succeed to convince them, then putting a secrets in the code is bad, and they shouldn't share secrets on Slack or put them in Jira tickets. Whatever you do, you're basically lost. So at GitGuardian, we really always start with this two-step process. Is like first what we call stop the bleeding. So really try to educate developers, give them the right tools in their own workflow so they can actually stop or actually leak less secrets. And then, you know, attack the big backlog of leakage and how you can actually safely secure them in Secrets Manager or just use just-in-time credential and so on. And to do that, it's a combination of prioritization, so identifying the most critical secrets, but also as Oded mentioned, like you don't want to start with a legacy application that nobody wants to touch. So you need to find the right balance between what's really critical in terms of risk, but also what's easy to fix. And it's doing that's building your first success as a partnership, as you mentioned, David, between like the DevOps team and the security team, that they need their first win. And that's the value we want to bring, is like how we can give this team the ability to remediate the first credential and to show that actually the risk is decreasing over time.
Yeah, it's also about hygiene, by the way. Hygiene is a great value to sell to the platform teams and to the engineering teams, because when you're moving into just-in-time and zero-standing privileges, you're basically selling them with the value of clean environments. So that's a great thing for a security leader and security professional to sell for hygiene for the engineering guys. This is definitely something that have been, at least for me, have been shown something that does provide results.
I mean, just to add to what Oded said on the hygiene point and taking a risk-based approach, clearly with the kind of tech debt, static credentials, a lot of them get created, they have lack of ownership, they've been around for years and years and years. No one knows if they're still in use, you know, who owns them. So to the hygiene point, cleaning up, see if you can get a view on what's out there and are they still being used, whether it's through monitoring controls or other techniques. At other orgs we've worked at, 60, 70% of the static credentials that were out there were just not used, right, stale. So cleaning them up, can massively reduce your surface area risk. Looking at things like overprivileged credentials. Do you have credentials that have write privileges that only need read? Again, you can start reducing that surface area risk for your controls like SOCs. If something was write and as read, it's not in, requirement for SOCs anymore. So hygiene, on the other side plays a huge part in sort of, taking that risk-based approach and starting somewhere, immediately. I think policy standards, another key area to the point CJ around education, and to David's point, you've got to start top down, and people need to know, hard-coded secrets. That legacy stuff is just not acceptable. The previous org, we even said, look, if you do this, it's a sackable offense. So, the message has to come top down and then through collaboration across all your IT stack.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. This has been an excellent conversation. I do want to give everybody a chance to say a final thought, a parting shot, a parting word to leave everybody out there, maybe a little bit of optimism.
I just think that we need people who care. We need people who care about doing things the right way. And we also need people who care about making it easier to do things the right way. So, whether you're a security platform engineer, developer, company who makes security tools or development tools, I think we're always going to be challenged to make doing the right thing as easy as possible.
Yeah, look, I would add just one point. We focus a lot on kind of the external threat, but also, you need to think about the internal risks that are out there. These kind of more legacy static credentials are actually being used, every day by your staff. And, if there's one way you want to be able to talk to your management about why you need to invest in a program, right, that there are control issues that you have internally, right, where people don't like using their PAM controls that we've implemented for humans. They start using kind of NHIs as an easy way out, and then a way to bypass controls. So this is an internal threat, probably bigger than your external threat, that you need to, be concerned about. And if that's not one reason to drive starting a program, I don't know what is. So that will be my closing thought.
Yeah, I think we touched a lot of different points, and my feeling is, yeah, it's definitely not an impossible mission to make sure like credentials are safe, and it's hard, it's difficult to do, and yeah, AI agents definitely are a big risk from the Secrets Sprawl perspective, but there could be also a big catalyst for security vendors to actually be able to automate workflows, to automatically submit pull requests, to actually fix a code, for example, or workflow to automatically push secrets to vault and stuff like that. So it's also an opportunity. And I deeply believe that, yeah, if as vendors were really focused on trying to solve the problem and not adding more and more dashboard, showing more and more problems, and really focus on what's matters the most, which is a really high impactful issues, we will succeed. But it's going to be a long journey, but it's definitely not impossible. And AI has transformed a problem that's almost impossible into a hard problem, but a solvable problem.
Yeah, so I think you got to respect the stakeholders. Okay, Office should be part of the platform. Okay, right? It should be something that developers can take advantage of automatically. Okay, and then they don't have to worry about the things that they might have worried about. Okay, nobody wants to manage keys, right? We have this tagline, right? If humans don't learn secrets, okay, they can't leak secrets. Okay, right? So why do you want? You should manage things by policy. So it should be part of the platform. I think AI is really important here. It's workloads talking to each other. Okay, and it's going to be autonomous, and we need to bring auth into it sooner. Okay, right, than accumulating more tech out there.
Start early as possible, and you can start small and early. That's my best tip for that. Not to wait, because the industry would move faster and faster. There is already technology today that is able to help you mitigate the risk, and to be less dependent on secrets, and to help machine identities to become more and more temporary, even if it's basic authentication or more advanced authentication. With regards to cooperation and respecting your peers, definitely with respecting the plans, but you need to start planning right now with other departments in the organization is crucial. And yet, it doesn't have to be the barrier to start implementing the solutions and the technologies that are actually dealing today with those machine identities that need to be revoked, rotated, and just in time created.
Well, that's a great place to leave it for now. Thanks everybody for being here, and enjoy the rest of your SecDays virtually. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.